Okay, welcome to our afternoon panel session, and thanks to all of you for being here. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about approaches to workplace learning and performance in today's hybrid world. So we're focused on the workplace with our panel this afternoon, and we're also doing something a little bit different than in past panels, which is that our panel itself is hybrid. So we have Veronica Chapman from Argentina here with us, and we have Gary Dickelman from the US and from Florida. And we have Bruce Cronquist from Seattle and from Dell on with us online. So we're looking forward to this panel, and in just a minute I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves.
Okay. Hi, how are you? I'm Veronica Chetman. I'm from Argentina. I'm Managing Director of Learning and Development at AISA, which is the water company of the Ciudad Autónoma de Buenos Aires. We have like 7,000 workers in AISA, and we serve almost 15 million people with our service. I also I'm professor at the University of Distance Education. So this kind of discussion appeals me from the corporate point of view and also from the academic point of view. I hope we can interact in this session, as I see this particular moment as a moment where all our certainties and all we know is so defied for reality that I think that it's important to build collective knowledge, and I see this opportunity as an opportunity of building collective knowledge. So I hope everybody can raise hands and we can interact and not make a panel, but like a collective knowledge construction.
Absolutely, fantastic, thanks. Gary.
Gary Dickelman. I don't know. I'm in learning and performance, and from a lot of perspectives, a lot of cross-discipline collaboration in what I do. I had a consulting company for years, but I've also worked in the insurance industry, in the nuclear industry, in the travel industry, in the blah, blah, blah industry, pretty much everything. And what's nice about all of that is you get to try to put the pieces together to, get hybrid best out of what everybody is doing. And then your next client is the one that benefits from that. So.
That's right.
Fantastic. Okay, Bruce.
Cool. So my name is Bruce Cronquist. I'm actually not IBM Watson. I'm a real person. And I'm a product owner here at Dell Technologies. Probably heard of our company. And also look myself as a senior learning consultant because I work with the stakeholders within the company for internal trainings. But I try and come up with unique, impactful learning solutions that don't necessarily require creation of an e-learning, things like that. You look at training, I've been in it probably over 50 years if you take into account the training that I did through Boy Scouts when I was a teen. So I've been seeing training change throughout the times, and it is changing, as they mentioned, much, much quicker these days. It's fun to watch.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thanks to everyone for being here. And so to start with kind of a broad question about employee expectations. So how have you seen employee expectations change since the pandemic when it comes to learning and development? So I'm curious to know everyone's impression on that. And can we start, Veronica, do you want to start on this side?
Well, the first thing from a learning and development point of view, I think, is no more unnecessary commuting. I think that expectations about learning and development became much more specific and demanding from relevance and to the point experiences, and for relevant really learning experiences, and not courses that has nothing to do with the operations and so on. So not only in my company, but everybody everywhere in my relationships with other colleagues from other companies, what I see is that they are very much looking for relevant use of their time, and as Hal says, said in the panel in the session I chaired before, they are looking for much more performance linked on the performance point training.
Okay, great. Gary?
Well, I can speak in part what were my own employees and how some of them I had a virtual business for 20 years and before anybody was really doing it. And some of my employees were aghast and could not survive in an environment and left simply because they had to be in an office, and others did really well. But in terms of the pandemic and so forth, I think first thing I want to say is I've been doing this stuff since the late 1960s, and why was this such a big deal when we suddenly had to start doing virtual and all of that stuff? I was thinking, well, it's just we have enough there to do it, and boy, that was really naive of me to think that way. So what I've seen is that, at least in some of the industries that I work in, that training performance budgets have shrunk because of the business challenges that they have, and the focus has shifted to technology, data science, and so forth, so that you can extract wisdom from data and operate your business more. But the connections to learning and performance have fizzled in a lot of cases. So it's left employees wondering, how the hell am I going to learn this stuff? How am I going to do this? Because as much as there's been attempts that are noble, there have been a lot of failures. And the employees, unfortunately, the people who have to learn are the ones that seem to suffer from this.
There's a lot to follow up on from both of you, but I want to turn to Bruce first and your perspective on employee expectations and how they've changed.
The first expectation when everyone went virtual is, hey, you're going to buy me a camera, a nice headset, and a ring light, right? All the requirements for, the platforms today. Thankfully, most everybody's figured out how to use Zoom, small learning curves for like the platform being used here for the conference. Now, I agree with Veronica where she mentioned that, we're basically not flying people all over the world anymore, which is nice in terms of not only savings for the company and savings on time for the people, but also you start thinking of the environment and things like that at the same time. Plus, we have the improvements such as like auto translation, where where the instructor may not be speaking their native language. They can go in and have the auto translated captions, which, about 70% accurate, 80% accurate. So that's becoming an expectation of the employees. The other thing is, when I was kind of thinking about this or mulling it over while out walking the dogs this morning, our workforce is more distributed these days. The old school of, hey, we're at a company, everybody comes into the same location, so we can do training in the same location. With everyone being distributed, our training also has to be distributed, and that's what the employees are starting to expect these days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm curious in terms of the learning experiences themselves, going to follow on the questions people, the answers people had. Are you seeing different expectations there? There was sort of this abrupt shift from, it was still a lot of instructor-led and many of the online experiences weren't quite ideal, to a lot of instructor-led online only. What are people thinking, 2 years in, what are people expecting and, what are you seeing? And we can stay with Bruce if you're okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think people are, their expectations have changed since we're all virtual now, and I think they're willing to accept, virtual classes. A lot of it's, the e-learning, whether you're taking it through the company or through like a third-party site. Kind of corollary to that is some companies, so Dell, we make a lot of money selling our training to to the companies that we sell our like storage solutions to. And sales loves being able to sell, hey, here's a 2-week-long ILT that we will go to do at your company. And the sales isn't able to sell that anymore, but the companies, in essence, their learners are still expecting that type of training. That's something we're having to kind of reset the expectations.
Makes sense. Veronica.
Well, in my company, pandemic meant not only a movement from the traditional classroom scholar model to online Zoom model, but also transferring a lot of training to the workplace, to really transfer it, because we give an essential service. Our operations couldn't stop for the pandemic because we give clean water to 15 million people. So we had to go on, and some upskilling and reskilling had to go on too, because, we had people who were sick, and another one had to take their position, and so on. So pandemic was an accelerator, not only for technology, but for learning technologies. So we developed learning on the job that we couldn't develop before, because pandemic denatured the idea that the only way of teaching was the traditional classroom. And then you had online learning that was a second class alternative when you couldn't make online classroom. So for us, it was a big game changer, because it showed, not we learning and development people that in my company were very aware of this, but it showed that, like, the top direction, that we had to embed learning in the working teams. So I think this is the most important things we found. Not only technology acceleration, but also an acceleration of the mindset of workplace learning.
Great. Gary, I know you kind of the consultant perspective, I think, on this one.
Yeah, well, here's what I say. The pandemic happened, unfortunately, at a time when, and I'm going to focus this primarily on where my main amount of my experience is it's in software, software products, and helping people to become competent on them. And when the model of development shifted from waterfall to agile, right? What's agile? If you don't know what that is, it just means you do things in very small pieces, you achieve achievable goals. Everybody knows that big bangs in software never work. By the time you finish the analysis and go to the next phase, the analysis is not valid anymore. So with these agile processes, the stress on the learning, on the knowledge ecosystem is huge, right? Because you might have changes every 2 weeks, that sort of thing. The employees were already frustrated with the movement toward more online learning, which they really didn't like, particularly in this industry. If you look at Eastern Europe, for example, they still love and thrive on face-to-face training. So I think bottom line on that was just more disappointment. That's what I saw. One of the budget cut things was an evaluation. Oh, well, things are changing so fast, and we have to spend so much money on this evaluation stuff here. Well, let's not do so much of that. Let's just count butts and seats on the computer, and et cetera. And not very good.
Yeah, I mean, do you also find that expectations change because of the way people are living their lives, right? So that people are, they want to find out information, they want to find a short training course, they want to find something as they need it in the rest of their lives, they can find what they need. And the idea of going to sort of these, somewhat monolithic, even if it's only a day, I'm going to spend an entire day in training. I mean, that was, that hasn't been a great idea in a lot of cases for a long time, but this became obvious to everybody. Like they saw there was another way, and I would imagine they would start to demand to see more of this at, in the workplace. So if that's in line with your experiences. So let me ask kind of a follow-up question for everyone. What are organizations doing differently to address this hybrid audience? Particularly, you've got an audience now where sometimes people are coming back to the office. don't think too many people are coming back every day at this point, but there are definitely a lot of people I know are coming back at least half time. So, but not all the time. So how do you handle, question we've had here at this conference, how do you handle the hybrid audience? Are there different types of learning experiences that you're creating or want to create to kind of make the most of those opportunities and challenges?
Well, one way is we don't have the number of experts, whatever, trainers, whatever, to even address the volume of needs around hybrid. So a lot of the effort has gone into semantics and ontology and machine learning and that sort of thing. If it's done right, it's like you say, there's a lot of courseware around, a lot of stuff there. How do you find it? How do you know what is there? If you have a search engine that just works on keywords, you're not going to find what you need. I mean, it's just crazy. So, and there hasn't been enough investment there, but I think it's starting to get there. I see it going on in academia, several of the sessions here, which is really encouraging. But I think we're a long way from all of the components besides just the cognitive stuff, particularly the affective stuff and all of that.
Great. Bruce.
Yeah, when I first joined Dell, there was a goal to have 65% of our trainings to be delivered online in some form by the end of this year, 2022. Well, COVID definitely forced the hand there. So we've moved most of our training to, being online. The push towards having it consumed, the e-learnings or, a recorded lecture, something like that, was being pushed because trying to have people do virtual instructor led with multiple time zones and things was just, too hard of a thing to figure out. When we're actually doing hybrid though, there's always the question, do you could treat everyone as in person, everyone as virtual, some mixture of the two? I have a quick poll for the audience there. If you can let me know how many hands go up. How many people there actually, when you're attending a session in person, click the join the chat polls and Q&A option only, in order to see what the back channel chatter was?
Yeah.
Anybody actually go ahead and
did
do that?
Did anybody in this room do that at this conference? We've had that option on the, on the event site that you can just see the chat and Q&A and polls from within, if you're watching from within. Has anyone actually done that on their phones while they're watching an in-person talk? There's 1, 2, 3, 2. Okay. Well, I'm not. One's doing it now. I'm not sure that counts. I think that's a slightly biased data point there. But at least 2 had already done it before, being, the power of suggestion forced their hand. Okay, but it's a few people in the room, but I think I'm guessing that it's probably easy for people to sort of get into where you are in the physical presence and not, necessarily feel, even remember that the other thing exists or that you want to do it, and so that, see what people say. But that's a great question, and I'm interested to know how that evolves over time too. Because one thing we're trying to do here is come up with different ways that there's more of an integrated hybrid experience, and that it all seems the same as much as it can be. We're not at the point of holographic projections of everybody into the rooms or anything, but maybe not so far away, I guess. It's a budget issue at this point, I think, more than anything else. All right. Well, great. Are there things that are, from the hybrid standpoint, and maybe I'll start with Veronica on this one, are there things that you find are working really well for the hybrid audience? I mean, I think that, some of the ways things have changed seem to be for the better, but are there things that you found are working really well to deal with these audiences?
Well, I will merge the two questions, and I'm glad Bruce broke the ice and started asking questions to the audience, because I was thinking about this event that is hybrid, in fact, and it happens something similar as we face in my company, and also when I give classes at the university, is that it's very difficult to work with a hybrid audience because they have different needs. It was happening here. We are here interacting with each other, and we have no opportunity of interacting with people that are in the virtual environment, and that happens at our company too. But on the other hand, how many of you in all these 3 days interacted with your husband, wife, brother, sister, chatting online, even on Instagram, seeing photos and sharing experiences, and even maybe with coworkers, my case, sharing snapshots and look at this and what happened and having a conversation. I was here and I was with my team at ISA sharing the experiences, and I was with my fellow colleagues of my teaching team sharing other kind of knowledge. And so I was having a parallel conversation with my team, but I didn't interact with people in this event virtual. So I'm sure you all did the same. We were, as Barico, an author I love, says, we all were in the universe and the metaverse, in both worlds. But only we were in our own metaverse, not in the event metaverse. So what we are trying to do to work with these hybrid audiences that are very divided in our company, because we have very industrial, operational people that doesn't even touch a computer, and we have people that works on desk all the time. We are trying to connect the dots. We are in researching, thinking. We have no great answers yet, I'm sorry, but we are trying to connect the dots between the virtual and the real and make each experience valuable, and both adding value. And for this, using the tools people use in everyday life. Yeah. Social media, LMS, it's very old for this communication networking challenge we think we have.
No, absolutely. And I mean, there's always really been a disconnect between the way people learn in the rest of their lives and the way that they learn, particularly in the workplace, which isn't always, I mean, this is an opportunity to change that, right? I think in the right ways and to kind of integrate things in the appropriate ways. Gary, I think you were about to jump in.
Yeah, real short story, and you probably know this. If you compare the Soviet space program with the US space program around the Apollo mission and so forth, we had these extremely complex multi-stage Atlas rockets and so forth to accomplish certain tasks. Today, most organizations that need to get things into space, you know, actually pre-Musk and all of that, would pay Russia for the BDB, the Big Dumb Booster, right? Cheap, easy to deploy, all of that sort of thing. The other story was about, anybody ever have a space pen? You know, special polymer, special pressurized with a gas and so forth, so you could write upside down in space and it would work. The Soviets had the same problem. They used a pencil, right? And so I'm just going to quote Donald Norman on that. He said that technology only works if it disappears into the infrastructure and so forth. And the things that disappear into the infrastructure are the things that are relatively simple to use and so forth. So what I see in software training anyway is that there's such a variety of bandwidth, age of machines, capabilities, and so forth. To really normalize all of that is really hard. And the things that seem to be working are sort of like pre-recorded simulations, stuff like that, and have that supplemented with a live thing. Over lunch, I was just talking to somebody who was going to another conference, and it's a virtual conference, but the It's done in kind of a hybrid way in that things are recorded, right, ahead of time and vetted so that you don't have all the technical glitches and all that going on. And then there's communication, then there's collaboration through the technology. It's a much simpler way to do things, and it can be extremely effective. When the technology, it's okay to have complexity in your job and learning and so forth. It's not okay to have complexity in the tools that make it happen. That is just stupid. That's why we hate software that is designed poorly and we can't use it and all of that stuff. That's why Amazon did the one-click order, right? And that is what the employees are looking for. They want some personalization, but keep things simple. Make them fun. We used to say that in the Cub Scouts. Kismet. Keep it simple, make it fun.
Bruce, it looks like you.
I love that you mentioned the, pre-recording the sessions. That's something we've actually started doing because we know that whenever there's, again, this is mainly virtual is the issue. But, besides technical glitches, if somebody's trying to present live, a lot of the time it's the back channel. That's, in the chat session where a lot of the information and learning can be going on, or the application. So we've done is started pre-recording the sessions, and while those are playing, the person doing the presentation is actually in the chat answering people's questions,
Yes.
positing questions, and things like that. And I'm actually trying to get that started right now. And we'll see if Jacob, try to see if anything interesting is going on in the back channel chat right now.
Yeah.
But get that shared up on the screen and saying, let's go and have these multimodal, discussions going on. And hopefully everybody today can actually spend attention to two different things at the same time.
Well, let me add something to that, if you don't mind. It's a study from probably 2 decades ago, but it was shipboard communication in the Navy. And they brought in this hotshot consulting group to come in and see if they could improve the communication system. The way communication systems work on a ship is everybody hears everything, right? It's not point to point. It's like you hear all the chatter and all of that sort of stuff. And so they said, well, that's distracting, that's this and that, and they did point to point, and that's when they started having accidents, that's when things, that's knowledge. That is hearing all of that go on, particularly in the military. Think about it. People are in the first 2 weeks, some have been there for 4 years or whatever. You've got a whole range of people, and they constantly shift people around. So having the levels of experience there of all of these people it's a live knowledge base. And if you don't, somebody can jump in and say, no, do it this way, or whatever that happens to be. Problem solving happens much, much quicker. So, and I think that's what's happening in the chat rooms, right?
No, I would add, keep it simple and also meaningful. Technology, for example, I think now we have augmented reality, virtual reality, and all of this stuff has very specific uses that are very meaningful for people, and they are welcome in this sense. And the same thing with chat communication. The experiences have to give meaning to the use of technology. So technology as an enabler, that's very important.
No, absolutely. And I guess I would add to that. I mean, the idea that you're starting with the goals that people have and building technology and using technology that's going to support those. And, I think one thing I might caution is, we hear the word it's simple, and I, of course, agree with simple, but to make sure it's not simplistic. Because there's something, when you design something and you do it well, it looks really easy. It's not easy to get there. It's usually really, really, really hard to get there. And then you get done, and of course, the worst thing about that is you get done and do something that's easy, and everybody says, well, yeah, why'd that take, 7 months or whatever? That looks like that should be easy, and anyone could do it, which is not at all the case. But there's something about trying to, I think, for me, be ambitious in what you're trying to accomplish, but make sure that it's simple to use in the end, which is different from starting with the constraints and building up and trying to do something simple. Because if you go that way, that's kind of where you get page turning e-learning, right? The simplest thing to build is page turning, and you take a quiz. The simplest thing to help you do your job better and more effectively and more enjoyably is not that. But you can do something that is complicated and complex, but then feels simple and intuitive to people. And it's not an easy task, but I think that's where we want to go. Technology tends to, I think, in my view, also overload features a lot, right? And so, we see that in all the systems that you use. You see, how can we structure things better so that we can get the things that we want more steps? Some of it's customization and some of it's more general thinking through what the goals are and how things might work. So a couple of thoughts there. And I know, so, do you see that applying to, your audiences, I guess, in a certain way? So as you design, what are you thinking in terms of uses of technology? Veronica, you were kind of starting to talk about that, how you wanted to use technology.
I wanted to add something. What you said, not keep it simplistic. I think we who are in charge of leading learning and development now have to be ambitious and also fearless, because change isn't the simple way in organizations. Organization doesn't usually love change, and we have to change a lot of things for this merge between learning and technology occurs, and we know it's a better experience at the end of the way. So I agree, it's not simplistic, not only technologically, that it's very hard, but also in the changing of mindset that it's necessary. Respecting the use of technology for various audiences, we are working with purpose and meaning. We think we are in our model. We have two pillars. One is performance, and we need to keep learning close to performance. That's why, Hal, I loved your presentation. And also close to purpose, meaning, because and technology is a good way of blending performance and purpose, because people nowadays communicate through technology, establish relationships with each other through technology, meet affections through technology, and also technology can enable things as risk-free error environments, augment our capabilities through augmented reality. We are experimenting a lot with augmented reality in industrial contexts, where we can that way put learning in the place where performance occurs. And so this we see as the relevant learning challenge we face, and it's technology as an enabler of solutions that are experienced that merge performance and purpose for people.
Absolutely. Hi. Well, great. I think it's probably a good time to just make sure we open up the floor for questions and comments. It's an experienced group here, and so we have Jerry in the back. So, Christian will bring over the microphone, and we're happy to talk about anything and everything that people want to do. So.
Excellent.
I have a couple of questions, and I hope they're related. The first one is a very general one, but we're 2 years into the pandemic now, and people have moved over to new types of learning. Has there been any research to tell us whether it has been effective or not effective, or somewhere in between? And the other, hopefully related question is, just because we went to a Zoom approach does not mean it's good learning and development. And so have you seen the needle move on quality of learning design with the new opportunities? And I can tell you from my point of view, we were getting ready to roll out a coaching class that was in person. We were about 50-50 ILT and e-learning, those types of things. But we decided to go through with it through Zoom, and I'll tell you, it was horrible. It was just horrible. And we had to take it back and redesign everything and rethink everything because we had a lot of breakout sessions and, things like that. Are people doing that, or are we just throwing everything out on Zoom and assuming it's good stuff?
I can start that. First question I would ask you back is, what do you expect to be measured? And I'll direct my attention to Hal's talk right before lunch about the learning and doing gap and so forth. Are you looking at how people perform on the job as a result of the intervention that you've done? Or are you looking at your LMS data to see how many butts were in seats and how long they spent on something and whether they passed the thing, right? Meeting a learning objective and meeting a performance objective they may be related, but they're two different things. So that's one thing. From Hal's perspective, I think, is that there's been an opportunity to really wrap your head around the fact that cognition is distributed. You only need a small amount in your head, provided you put the right artifacts around a person that they can grab and they know when to grab it. So that's where I've seen some good work being done, but it's all around, it's cognitive science and distributed cognition, but it's I don't know, it's really about effectivism and the effective domain, because what you're trying to do in that case to get people to do better in something is to feel better about what they're doing, and so that's where I've seen improvement in measurements on how people respond, what their affect is and all of that, and that's where the big gap is when we start doing this hybrid stuff or online and all of that, because I vote with my feet. I hate this stuff. This is crap. Or even my cell phone, where they try to cram so many things into here that I even go to Twitter and I can't even select the thing I want because there's some other hot section I don't know about, and it blows up and it goes somewhere else and all of this. I said, for God's sake, could you just be a little bit simpler about all of this stuff? Technology is getting in the way in a lot of cases.
Other comments on that? Another question.
I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to share a perspective. I run a e-learning company, and just in the last 6 months, we've had about 12 companies contact us to leverage their Zoom content and transform it into an interactive, well-thought-out course. They don't have the funds to start over completely and record new video. So their goal is to hopefully have us map out, a course that makes sense and that achieves their goals and objectives, but leverages materials that they've already recorded that are not bad. They're just not great on their own. They just need a little bit more foundation. So hopefully, to answer your question, from my perspective, it seems like people do care and they do recognize that it's not great, but maybe they're still in transition.
I think that also, I mean, from my point of view, we have workplace learning research and technology-driven research. Not much of what I know of the both fields combined, which I think it's very important. But I think in the bottom line, the point is, what learning experience do you design? In 1782, they are the first ads in the newspapers of courses of taquigrafía is in Spanish, shorthand, by mail. 1 century after, when the mail developed a lot, the correspondent studies started to have interaction, and people decide designed valuable experiences that people started to follow. Technology is this Zoom doesn't make a course better. Virtual reality, I think this maybe it's really obvious, but I think it's important to remember it every day. What makes a better learning experience is the designing of a learning experience, and technology is a great enabler for some goals. For example, the goal of moving learning from classroom to work. We are using now the mobile version of our LMS, and that allows us to do something that was very difficult earlier. That is to develop leaders that are trainers from their teams with an agile perspective of learnability on scrums and trying. We are not an agile company. We are a very traditional company. But in our version of agile teams that learn each day, because we are a water company, we have no competition. Our knowledge is very internal. We can't take a chief of the water plant from the market because there's no market. So we need our teams to learn from each other. And now with the mobile application, we can bring leaders to the palm of their hands the possibility to share with their teams, that's a technology that it's very well distributed, because in my country, in Argentina, the infrastructure is not so good in other fields. So our mind is in the learning experience, and we look to technology and see all the alternatives. We don't marry with any technology, and we take what can enhance the learning experience. And there's a lot. There's a lot. Augmented reality, I think, for industrial contexts is great, because in maintenance, you can move learning from classroom, that you learn if predictive maintenance, you have to, and you move it directly to the job. That's great, and that's what the kind of things I think. Maybe this is obvious, but we should keep the focus, because the market tries to push technology, and we have to choose technology.
So I would like to reply to your question too, because your question was kind of the central guiding question that Peter and I used as we were coming out of complete on-site and moving into virtual. And just to build on what Ginny said, because our field has always been pedagogy and andragogy, the science of how do adults learn, we knew we could not just take our on-site program.
Where do you?
Our field is communication, and our home is Eugene, Oregon, University of Oregon.
Okay.
And we mentioned in our presentation on Wednesday that we had 23 days to prepare to switch our first on-site conference to virtual. And fortunately for us, it was the Pew Research Center, and they were completely research-based, so we had a great partner. But I am sure we spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to figure out, with this new Zoom opportunity, we can't just take, for example, a coaching course or a course in conflict or a course in how to make meetings better and just sit in front of a camera and do it. And so that was our mission. And I believe that to this moment, we are still figuring out better and better ways. And I will say that at this point, just because we've really thought it through, I think we really have cracked the code, meaning How do you get people in a Zoom breakout room and every single person participates? And also what Hal was saying, their performance outcomes. There are deliverables from every breakout room, and the deliverable is show you can use the model that we just talked about. So I think, to me, the answer to that question is you don't just get in front of a camera and do what you've done. And everybody in this conference, really, is a learning and development specialist. So it's saying, how do we take our content and create a new way of having learners learn it?
Yeah. Well, the woman who's here from University of DC talked about this transition and the fact that they've created a 50-page instruction manual for their professors and so forth at UDC on how to do the hybrid stuff and all of that. And the first thing I thought of was a 50-page, why are the shoemaker's kids going barefoot, right? Why aren't we applying it? We're talking about the learners all the time, but we have all this technology and we have the same thing to try to move the mark on for example, moving a lecturer from that mindset to be a facilitator. And that's part of what we're talking about here. And we did that in the travel industry. And the stand-up instructors, they hated it at first, and then they loved it because we did measure things. And guess what? Student satisfaction went up, their scores went up, they were able to perform better and book more segments on the system that we were doing.
Yes, you have to go back to what is needed, what the learner or student needs to know versus what's nice to know. The 50-page manual is probably just 3 to 4 pages of here's what you really need to do, and then if you run into an issue, here's the appendix, go back and look at it, figure it out, here's an FAQ, or just you failed, but you failed in a safe environment, keep practicing. It was kind of fun when we practiced in this environment beforehand for the presentations.
And I want to add something very short that I don't want to leave without saying this. Regarding research, I don't know. I read research on the subject. I read the publication of, I don't know, Deloitte or Horizon Report and everything you name it. And one thing we know is that more than 90% companies around the world, big companies, have an extensive and intensive use of their LMS and Zoom and everything else. And we don't know about learning outcomes maybe, but we know something, that it is that technology during pandemic made it possible for people to be together and made, in most cases, resilience possible because we connected and we were able to going on through and thanks to technology. So I think that what pandemic really proved is that technology was a great enabler for teams, persons and teams and organizations to continue their task and to mentally survive in many cases. So I think that resilience is a word we must keep in mind and see like the affective and human dimension of technology also. And if you take this into account, you can address motivation, interest, the very human dimensions of learning that and technology demonstrated it can be an enabler of all this. So it's in the creativity as she said, our ability of designing and looking in technology what technology can give.
Great. Other comments and questions? Anyone else want to follow on?
Well, I just want to say the most common problem we're seeing our clients wrestling with is to who comes back and who stays virtual and how. And we're seeing this schism within companies where some of the teams, their managers are kind of mandating them come back 2 or 3 days a week. And then other managers within the same company are saying, hey, don't worry about it. You know, come and go as you will. And there's been a real competition and jealousy as the employees from these different groupings, these different team members get really upset. And they say, why do I have to come in 3 days a week? Look at Joe's. They're doing the same stuff we are. They don't have to come. They can come and go whenever they want to. I don't know that it's the biggest problem, but it's the one that's most common right now.
And the interesting thing about that is that all of that is both peripheral to the whole learning thing, right? And also, it's very much connected to it. Short story. When I started building high-rise buildings, apartment buildings in New York City, and first elevators, the biggest problem they had was during rush hour, people going to work, coming home from work, the queues and they tried all sorts of things. Do we need more elevators? Do we need it differently? And so forth. You know how they solved the problem? Mirrors. Human factors engineers how many old elevator banks do you see that have mirrors on outside, or reflective stainless steel or whatever? Oh, I didn't even notice it took so long for the elevator to come. I was like busy admiring myself, you know? That kind of, those are the kind of, that's where the cognitive science and the human factors and all of that comes in. The thing we think is sometimes the most important to mitigate a situation like that is actually very, very simple, you know?
Sometimes it's the mirror.
Great. Right. Other questions? Great. And to follow on, I think a point that's come through loud and clear is the idea of anything we want to do should be meaningful and relevant to the audience, right? And that's where learning often falls short, right? People don't really necessarily want to remember things that they may or may not use. It's, you know, that's sort of an educational model that isn't going to help you tremendously in the workplace, but it puts you in experiences where you feel respected, where you see the application, you see why you would care about this, and then you go ahead and ideally do something, you know, do something fun and interesting most of the time. Sometimes the challenge is what makes it fun, right? Like, fun doesn't always mean easy, because I think that gets a little bit off cycle too. Like, there's the idea of, well, let's take something that's mostly memorization but add a game to it. And it's like, well, okay, it's still just memorization,
Exactly.
but there's a game, right? Now, if you build an interesting game environment where somebody wants to do something that's related to their job, like, you know, we've built some sort of game-like elements into being a cashier at a fast food restaurant. And you think, like, you know, it's really not that exciting to figure out which keys to hit. But when you've got the speed and accuracy meters on the screen, there's a customer in front of you in video, and you've got to move quickly, it's a kind of fun challenge. I mean, you'd actually be amazed at how much fun some people find it to be. And it's exactly the real job. And you're being evaluated on exactly the criteria that you would be evaluated on in order to be a successful cashier. You should be fast and you should be accurate. Those aren't artifices. They are the things that you would be, you know, evaluated on. And I think one of the things that I think several of you have said is the idea that measurement drives everything in a certain sense, right? It always comes back to, you know, if you're measured a certain way, you're going to try to reach that measurement. So if the measurement doesn't align with what the actual goals are, you're not going to really find yourself doing the right thing, and you won't find your employees doing the right thing. And that's where technology, again, can come in and do so many different things. So we only have a few minutes left. I'm curious to hear each of our panelists' view on what you see happening in the future in workplace learning. And I think you can choose, you know, either what you see happening, what you foresee, or what you would like to see happening. And I think either of those or both were reasonable answers to this. I'm interested to see, like, how you see the future and how you see the future as it should be.
I will be very brief and just quote what is known as Gruden's Law, and that is, if the technology does not serve the people who do the work, it will fail or be subverted. I have a lot of examples of that. Look, Alan Cooper said this. He's the guy who invented Visual Basic years ago. And Alan basically, he you know, it was used as a prototyping tool and all of that sort of thing. But he had a lot of rubrics around that basically address that problem of simplicity, you know?
Well, after all we lived, I think that we should try to be better, live better, be happier. So I will go to the second one. For the second one, what do I want? And I want us learning and development professionals to be able to bring all the conditions, technology, methodology, to put learning and development at the service of happier people, happier teams, happier organizations, because we, humanity, deserve it. And thank you, David, for bringing us together again. I'm so happy to be face-to-face with people. Thank you so much.
It's great to have you back and see you again. And one last just follow-up on that. So do you see more integration then between, as we're starting to see in this pandemic world, life and work in that way, as part of your vision of where learning fits in?
Well, I think this somebody as he was saying, I'm sorry I don't know the names. This jealousy between people who has to go 3 times or twice a week or never to the office is because something good of the pandemic was a little bit of more work-life balance, and nobody wants to lose that. So I think technology is also that, an enabler for a better balance. And this is designing experiences. This is what people want. People want to learn when they need it, to work when they need it, and this is something maybe too optimistic, I know it, and a little bit naive, but some visions are always a little bit optimistic and naive, and I hope we can go towards that.
No, and I agree with you. We want to shoot for that goal, and even if we make it, if we make it 90% of the goal, that would be fantastic. If we make it 70% in the near term, that's still really good, and that's a really different decision than accepting the status quo, realizing that it's not the right thing. Bruce, your thoughts on the future, whether it's what you will see or what you want to see.
I think what we're probably going to see, the goal of learning or training is getting people to do a better job, be happier, so on and so forth. I think we're headed more towards, training at the time of need. Just that idea of, hey, here's hybrid learning, let's get a bunch of people to learn together. I think that's probably going to be on the way out. Again, I'm kind of looking out because people are more distributed, people are doing more work on their own, not working as parts of teams. So I'm thinking training is going to go and head the same way. Again, I know it's probably a little controversial, but hey, that's where I think it's headed right now.
All right, fantastic. With that, I think we're just about at the end of the hour. Hour is never enough, so I want to thank our panelists, Veronica, Gary, and Bruce, once again for being up here and having such a wonderful conversation. And Bruce is literally, for us in person, up there, up on the screen. And everyone else as well, I really appreciate the contributions, and the conversational nature of this panel has really been a lot of fun. So thanks again, everybody. We're going to go to a break now, and we'll be back in half an hour with parallel sessions. And thanks again. I'll wrap the session up.